as you can see, after thinking about it a little bit, I decided to go with a single square chord object, as you see here in my design. I have a single core. I decided to go with that. That's the most efficient way to do it, so I decided to use that approach. I've invoked Grasshopper and loaded in the GFab script, the grillage fabrication script, and you'll notice that it's a pretty big script. But we have on here, we have our inputs on this end, what we need to bring in, and the settings that we need to make. And on the far right, we have our outputs. And in the middle, there's a connection that we'll need to make. But here are your inputs. Here's the connection that we need to make to activate the script. And here are the outputs where we can output our models. Now let's go in and let's zoom in here. And as always, when we see orange, we know that Grasshopper wants something. And in this case, it wants a grillage object. So we'll right-click on that. And we'll click on Set 1B Rep, come into Rhino, and we'll select our object. Okay? And you notice that it generates our grillage pattern, our waffle structure, as we look at it here. We also noticed immediately that our waffle structure is running parallel to our core, and actually want that to run perpendicular to our core. So what we're going to do, we're going to come over here in this window, and I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. And I want to bring this up into the positive quadrant of our Cartesian plane. And now we're good, because as we maximize this window and look, our core is running perpendicular to our grillage in the B direction. So that's the direction that we'll be concerned about. Now, we need at least one cross-section in A in order for the script to work. So what we're going to do, we're going to come over here. Let me minimize the window so that we can see what's going on over here. We need to have at least one section in A. So we'll come over here in our Grasshopper script, and we have this A spacing toggle. And I'm going to move this over until we get that single section right there in A. We got a single grillage line in A. So we have our sort of dummy to activate the script. Now, on our B grillage, what we want to do there, we want that to reflect the B spacing here. We want that to reflect the thickness of our material. So the Luan that we're using, that we're going to come in and edit that. That's 0.2. So we're going to pass a value of 0.2 there, and we're going to click OK. Now that's going to generate our complex grillage, okay? And you'll notice that if we zoom in here, we can see that that's serial sliced. And let me slide this out of the way here, and I'm going to bring this into our perspective window, and here we can clearly see our cross sections being defined perpendicular to our core along that axis. So we're all well and good. Now what we need to do, now that we set that up, now what we want to do, we want to come over to here, and we have to make the connections between A to E from our dispatch to our planar sections. So we'll click here, A to E goes there, A to E goes there. And that will activate our object, our grillage script. Now what we need to do, we need to come over here to the bottom, and we have to play around with some toggles over here in the label and layout. So we want to generate our grillage layout, and that we turn to true. And now you notice that now we have our sections listed, and each one has a core in the center, so that's looking good. Okay, we want to label our sections, we want to change that to true. So that now, as we look, we actually have labels in our sections. And sometimes you need to check and make sure that those are going all the way through. And if they're not, you can adjust the size of the labels, and that usually fixes it. Okay? So we've got our inputs taken care of. We've got our grillage. Everything looks pretty good. Okay? Now we want to go on the other end of our script and look at our outputs, because one of the things that you notice these notches here. We want to get rid of those because we really don't need those. Okay? And we'll also get rid of those also. So let's come over here to our script, and let's go all the way over to our outputs. Okay? And so we almost know immediately that the A notches, we want to turn those off. Okay? And our A trim sections, we want to turn those off also, because we don't need to see that. Okay. We also need to turn off our A ribs. So we don't need to see those. Okay. We also want to come in here, and we want to turn off our B notches also, so that we get rid of those notches right there. Okay. And let's turn off our A sections there. And also, while we're at it, let's turn off our labels in A. Okay. So now we're left with what we really want, which are the B elements. The B elements. Okay. At this point, we're now ready to move these elements over into Rhino, and let's do them one by one, and it'll take a little bit of layer management to do so, to perform those operations. So let's bring this over here so that we can look at this a little closely. So anytime anything's red in Grasshopper, we know that that belongs to Grasshopper. We click on it in Rhino and we really can't affect it because it belongs to Grasshopper. Okay. If we come over here and we click on our B sections, you notice that those turn green, which means that they are active. Okay. Let's create a active layer here in Rhino, and we'll call that our outer cut for right now. And as an outer cut, we generally want to paint those magenta. Okay, and let's make that the active layer. And with that selected, let's come back into Grasshopper and come over to our Bake Selected Object tab. And so we bake that. Okay, and let's turn off our preview. And you notice that those are now painted magenta, meaning that they now belong to Grasshopper. Okay. Extract our text elements. Okay. And so let's go over to our B text tag, and we want to click on that and make that active. And what we want to do once we make that active, we want to come back into Rhino, create a new layer, call that text, and we're going to paint this red as we do in Rhino. Okay. And while it's selected, we want to come back in here. We want to make that the active layer. Okay. In Grasshopper. And we want to come over here to our Bake element node and bake that in. Okay. It'll take a second, and we'll come over here, turn off our preview. Oops. Didn't bake it. So let's bake that again. Make sure that it's baked. Hit it twice. And let's turn off the preview. There it goes. It belongs to Rhino now. Okay, if we come in here, oops, we got 2 layers. I'll show you how to get rid of that. I doubled up on that. I'll show you how you can get rid of that. Okay, and that's it. So now we can turn off our preview in Grasshopper. We can actually minimize it because now we're done. We got everything that we wanted to get out of there. We got our serial sections and we got our labels. Let's come up here and do an edit, select objects, duplicate objects. And that selects all those duplicate layers that I made, labels that I made, and I'm going to hit delete. Okay? And now I'm going to come back once again to my text layer, and I'm going to select my object, my text objects. And one of the things that you have to do, because right now if we were to look at our object properties, they are listed as text. And we want to make those curves. And the way that we do that, we come over to our explode gadget and we explode those. And now we've captured them as curves. And now we're pretty much good to go. One of the final things that we may want to do, and it's a little detail, and I'm going to maximize this window to do it, is that I like to have these inner elements right here. I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to call that layer inner cut. And I'm going to paint that layer blue, as is the convention for our inner cuts when we do those. And what we want to do is make that layer active. And what you'll want to do is you want to copy those and change the object layer so that those go blue. And you come in here and select these like so, and you do a change object layer, make those go blue. And you always want to sweep, in this case, to do these, you want to lay these out, because now we're in the layout phase of our modeling. You want to select those and you want to change the object layer. Okay, and at this point we really don't need our object anymore, so we can turn off the object layer, and we may want to create yet another layer. And at this point we want to create a layer, and we'll call this no cut because it's a reference layer. And on that layer we'll create a rectangle the size of our laser bed. Let's make that cyan so that we follow the conventions properly. And we want to click here, and we'll do a 48, comma 48, which is the size of our laser cutting bed. And we hit enter. And what we can begin to do is to select these. It's a good idea to group them, Control G, and begin to move those over. Group, Control G, move those over. And this is a little bit of the work. And we'll do a Control G and move these over. And basically at this point what we're doing is that we're filling our page with these elements so that the cross sections are ready to go and ready to be sent to the laser cutter. And that's basically an overview of the process. And I hope that this is helpful. Thank you.